In our last video, we were in Naples, Florida, where we explored Clam Pass, the Gulf of Mexico, the Naples Pier, Old Town Naples, and we hiked along a fabulous greenway. In this video,
we are in Caldwell, Kansas.
Okay, right off the bat, I'm going to acknowledge that yes, this is our follow-up to our Naples video. It might seem kind of strange, but this is actually pretty representative of our travels. We do fly to different places, but we also like to travel to areas that are reasonably close to where we are based out of. And this would be an example of the latter.
The truth is, we love seeing small towns just as much as big cities. We're up for any new adventure, whether it's mountains, plain states, or being at the beach. Always fun to see something new.
So with that said, Carol, why don't you give us a little bit of history of Caldwell, Kansas?
Caldwell, Kansas sits about 50 miles due south of Wichita. It's known as the Border Queen because it sits right on the border of Oklahoma. And it's also known as the toughest town on the Chisholm Trail.
Well, I guess then you better tell us what the Chisholm Trail is.
I'm glad you asked because I didn't know either. The Chisholm Trail was the major route out of Texas for livestock. What's interesting is it was only used from 1867 to 1884, but it was the route where longhorn cattle were driven north, and that was a steady source of income for Texas, which was pretty impoverished following the Civil War.
So this opera house is a pretty cool looking building. Does your magic phone have anything to tell us about it?
As a matter of fact, it does. So this opera house that you see here is not the original. The original opera house was actually at the end of the block. By 1884, the city of Caldwell was growing and it was interested in promoting its finer cultural things. So they built a 3-story brick opera house that held 1,200 people. As a frame of reference, the current population of Caldwell is 1,025. So this was a big opera house. And it had a roller skating rink in the basement. So it opened then, but unfortunately, in 1918, a fire destroyed it. So the opera house we have today is a newer version.
Circling back to what you said earlier, I just love visiting small towns like this. Places I'd never heard of, most of them barely register on a map, because what you find is sort of what I like to call real America. These are definitely not tourist towns, although as a tourist, I find them very enjoyable.
I agree, and as a history buff, this was a great location because they had signs throughout the town that really told of their colorful past. So one of those stories was the very first building built in Caldwell was a saloon. Seems like a good starting place. It was built in 1869. And so as cattle drivers came through from Texas, the sign they saw promoted the First Chance Saloon. And on their way back to Texas, the other side of that sign said it was the Last Chance Saloon. Now, a posse in 1874 came into Caldwell and they were looking for outlaws. They thought the outlaws were holed up in the saloon, which wasn't true, but that was what they thought. And so they burned it to the ground, and that was all for the Last Chance Saloon.
A good marketing department.
Indeed.
So this town, rightly so, is very proud of its heritage, and there's placards like the ones on the screen right now located all throughout the downtown, which makes for an awesome self-guided tour. All right, so here we are approaching Heritage Park. This park was created in '89, and where this park is once stood a 3-story building, about 75 feet tall, that was actually the highest building in this county, Sumner County. So between 1879 and 1885, violence and politics claimed 18 different city marshals. And editor of the Wichita paper said, quote, "As we go to press, hell is again in session in Caldwell."
One of those marshals was Henry Newton Brown. He was hired as marshal in 1882. Now, what he didn't tell the city council was that his resume included cattle rustling, riding with Billy the Kid, and a little murder charge prior to this job. But the citizens liked his approach so much that in 1884, they gave him a brand new Winchester rifle. Now, in May of '84, he took a little vacation from his marshal duties and went with some friends, where they went to Medicine Lodge, Kansas, robbed a bank, and shot 2 bank employees. That was the end of his marshal career.
All right, well, to continue our theme of murder and lawlessness, and this is right from the town's website for the Heritage Park, on the northeast corner of Chisholm and Avenue A stood the Red Light Saloon, which helped give Caldwell its reputation as the most lawless cowtown. In April of 1880, George and Mag Wood literally disassembled their Wichita saloon and brought it to Caldwell in what became its most murderous establishment. People killed in that saloon included marshals, cowboys, bystanders, and even the owner when he tried to protect the honor of one of his quote-unquote girls who both lived and worked upstairs. So the liquor was illegal in Kansas by state law and illegal in the Indian Territory to the south by federal law. Somehow Caldwell always had a good supply for the dusty cowboys. So with that said, Carol, let's put down the phones and let's just talk a little bit about our venture into the alleyways.
Like we've seen in some other Kansas small towns, we found some really incredible murals in the alleyways, starting with Border Queen here. Now we're in the back of the post office and you can see the old stamp. And as Jeff mentioned, saloons were a big part of this town's early days, and here we are approaching the back of the saloon. I really like the back of the library here. And if you check out our Lindsborg video, you can see that they also had book spines on the back of their library.
Once you venture away from Main Street, you get to a lot of nothing real quick, but there is the obligatory grain elevator that's in every small Kansas town.
In 1891, the Cherokee tribe sold their chunk of land known as the Cherokee Outlet, which is south of here, to the U.S. government. Then in 1893, 15,000 people gathered here and took off for the land rush for over 6 million acres that laid between Caldwell, Stillwater, and the Oklahoma Panhandle.
So here we are back on the main street. The main street's also the highway, which runs north-south, so we're heading back to the south. And then we actually kind of retraced our steps a little bit to pick up some of the things that we missed because now the sun was in a better position. And then we kind of finished off our tour with a trip down the opposite side street's alleyway, which is what we're looking at now.
So if you're interested in visiting Caldwell, or if you just happen to be in the area, they host the annual Chisholm Trail Festival the first weekend in May every year, where they relive their Wild West days.
The festival includes period-correct costumes, reenactments, and depending on when I post this, is probably just a week or two after this video lands on YouTube.
We're coming up here on the Carnegie Library, and if you see our Kingman video, they also have one in their town.
With that said, let's wrap this one up. All right, we usually don't do this in the car, but it's really windy all of a sudden. So we'll wrap this video up with, what did you think of Caldwell, Kansas?
What was fun about coming through here is when we moved to Kansas, this was the first town we hit when we crossed from Oklahoma into Kansas. So now it's fun a year later to go back and see it. So there were really cool buildings in this town and some really neat murals.
Yeah, this town prides itself on its old cowboy days, and the placards you see throughout the video reflect that. And I'm sure by the time at this point in the video, Caroline's already given us all the history of it. So yeah, it's the first town you come into of any size once you come up from Oklahoma. And so it's almost been exactly a year to the day that we came through. So we had a good time, and we will see you next time.
Cheers!